Days Gone is right around the corner. It's going to be releasing in a couple days, and I am very excited for it, as you can probably tell. And I think that, honestly, Days Gone is going to prove a lot of people wrong. Now, I'm not going to say everyone, because there are a lot of people from where I'm sitting that are also very excited for this game, and there's a lot of positivity surrounding it. So I'm not trying to preface this video by making it seem like everybody's down on it and people are just trashing it or anything like that, because that's not the case at all, and I'm very glad, because I don't think the game deserves that at all. But I can say that there is a decently sized group of people who either are very unsure of this game, which is perfectly fine, but there's also a group of people that seem to be very down on this game and have this idea that it's going to be a failure or a major disappointment, or even in some cases a massive flop for Sony, which, you know, I think it's been a while since we've seen one of those, right? In fact, I'd say people have been very, very impressed with their first-party offering in recent years. So Days Gone, honestly, yeah, I can see why there's some people who think it's going to be generic, it's going to be a letdown, it's kind of like been there, done that type of territory, but Sony has been marketing this game a lot recently since it's, you know, just about to release. And based off of everything I've been seeing, I have to say I am impressed with Sony Bend. And I think that they're going to be looked at very differently once this game launches, because Sony Bend hasn't made a big game in a very, very long time. I think the last major game they made, honestly, or that people kind of look to, is Siphon Filter. So seeing what they're trying to achieve here with Days Gone, with this big open world campaign that's going to be 30 plus hours, 6 hours of cutscenes, they're trying to really create a living, breathing world here. When you hear about what they're doing with their tech and the hordes and the way they're going to work within this world, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that they clearly chewed off here. And I think there's some people who maybe think that maybe Sony Bend, you know, chewed off more than they could handle here, or they bit off more than they could handle. And while I will say that there is a chance that this game may not live up to the, I guess we could say, hype or standards that I'm setting it at, not that I'm expecting it to be like the next God of War. I need to make that clear as well. I'm not sitting here saying, let me tell you why Days Gone is going to be the next game of the year, or why Days Gone is going to be just as good as God of War, or say a game like The Last of Us, because I'm honestly not expecting that. I think those expectations are a little bit too lofty, if I'm being honest. I think if you are somebody who is going into Days Gone thinking you're going to get another Last of Us type experience, or you're going to be playing, you know, 2018's Game of the Year, similarly to what you were doing last year with God of War, you might end up being a little bit disappointed. Now, I could be wrong on that as well. Maybe this game will be insanely great, like to the point where nobody saw this coming. But I think that's a little bit unlikely, and I think that anybody who has that mentality is definitely getting a little bit ahead of themselves. Sony has proven, and this is why I'm excited for Days Gone, Sony has proven that they believe in quality over quantity, and I think that that is truly their greatest strength when it comes to their ability to constantly and consistently deliver amazing gaming experiences, even with developers like Sony Bend, who do have a lot to prove here, right? Just like Sony Santa Monica did, but with God of War. But I think we could say that studios like Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica and others that are underneath Sony, or owned by Sony, I should say, they kind of have a pedigree, or they've had a pedigree based off of a lot of different games they've made in the past. And again, talking about Sony Bend here, I think that they have more to prove with Days Gone than, say, other studios did, like Naughty Dog with The Last of Us. Because even though The Last of Us ended up truly blowing people away, I don't think anybody really expected that, and they were certainly delighted that obviously that's what ended up happening, and it kind of catapulted Naughty Dog to another level. But people, I don't think, were worried about The Last of Us being terrible. I could be wrong. It's been a long time. Maybe there were some people. But, you know, people looking at God of War, another good example, when we saw the first gameplay reveal, I don't think anybody was worried that, oh man, this game, I don't know. I don't think anybody felt that way at all. People were very excited about what they saw. And Days Gone's interesting because the way this game started, a lot of people were a little bit skeptical at first. When we saw the first gameplay reveal, it looked a little bit repetitive. People were unsure if this was going to be anything more than just a game where you pick up a gun and you shoot a bunch of zombies, because even though I love zombies, I think we can all agree that we need a little bit less of that. We need some advances to be made when it comes to what will make a zombie game appealing in 2019, right? And when you look at how long Sony Bend has been developing this game, when you take a second to think about the delays that it's had, which some people were worried about that, right? There was people who were thinking, oh man, this game's getting delayed. What does that mean? Does it confirm our suspicions that this game is maybe going to be kind of a dud and things just aren't going well? And Sony Bend's, they bit off more than they can chew. They're not going to be able to handle this. I don't think that's the case. I think these delays, the significance of them is that when you listen, again, this kind of goes back to Sony's philosophy when it comes to their game creation and what they expect from their studios. One of their philosophies is if you're going to tackle something that's been done before, you need to do it, but you need to do it the best, right? And I think that that's a great philosophy. It's also pretty intense, right? So if you're Sony Bend and you're going to tackle a open world zombie game, or something that's very similar to that, a lot of pressure is being put on them where, well, fine, Sony's going to say, fine, you can do that, but you need to be the best at it. You need to make the best open world single player narrative driven zombie game that's ever been made. And if I'm being honest, maybe this is a little bit hyperbolic of me, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like Sony Bend may have actually nailed it. Now, we're going to have to wait to see exactly how in-depth or smooth, I guess we could say, the gameplay is, how compelling it is. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like the best, but it looks very good. I haven't seen anything that makes me think, oh wow, that looks not fun at all, or that looks terrible. I think a while ago when we saw earlier versions of the game, there was definitely some stuff with the animations, definitely some stuff with the enemy AI, but it seems like this extra time and coming back to the delays here has been spent on truly giving Sony Bend the time and the space that they need to be able to make sure that when this game does launch, now it may not be perfect at launch, I'm sure there will be some bugs and there will be a few hiccups here and there. I think to expect any game to launch in a perfect state is just having an unrealistic expectation, but I'm not making excuses either. It should be far from broken, right? I think that these delays gave Sony Bend, and Sony gave them the time necessary to really make sure that if you're going to expect a studio like Sony Bend to make an open world zombie, narrative driven game with interesting characters, an interesting world, a world that feels alive, and just create a great game basically, or one of the best, it's going to take time. And so, this is where we look at everything kind of coming together now that we're about to be at launch. And I'm not expecting it to be Game of the Year 2018, but I am expecting it to prove a lot of people wrong. I think that there's a lot of people who have doubts because Sony Bend has a lot to prove, because it's a zombie game, even though they are freakers, but for all intents and purposes we will just continue to call them zombies. And it looks like some people just have this idea that it's going to be bland, it's going to be dull, it's going to be boring, and the characters aren't going to be interesting, the story is going to be bad. But I don't know. I think it may be the exact opposite, if I'm being honest. I think that this may end up being one of the best gaming experiences I have of 2019, and that is really something special. And this is why, and I really don't, I know some people are going to take it this way, I'm not trying to go out of my way here to throw Xbox and Microsoft under the bus by making this comparison, but I feel like it's a necessary one for a few reasons. The first reason being that Days Gone was originally supposed to launch right around the same time as Crackdown 3, but other games such as Anthem, and I forget which other game came out at the time, but Sony ended up delaying it, maybe because of that, but also maybe because the game could use more polish. And, looking at Crackdown 3 and what ended up happening with that game and seeing how many delays that suffered and how long people waited for that, I'm simply trying to point out the comparison between these two first-party games, right? Where Crackdown 3 is a situation where people had a certain expectation and they ended up waiting a lot longer, and there was a lot of delays and a lot of problems, and it started to become very clear that this game is not going to be anything amazing. And I think people at the very least were hoping maybe it'll be good, or at least decent, and it ended up just kind of being a huge letdown to most people. There are some people who enjoyed it, obviously, but when you look at Days Gone, it's a game that has multiple delays, and we've seen and heard through the grapevine that there maybe was a little bit of an internal struggle, and there were some roadblocks and some obstacles that they had to overcome. But Sony, again, based off of what I've seen and what I'm seeing now, has given them the time to do what they need to do. They've given them the budget. This is clearly a big budget AAA title. And Sony Bend has, in my opinion, I can't say for sure yet because I haven't played the game myself. The reviews aren't out. It seems to me that they really have proved themselves as a worthy first-party Sony developer. We're like, hey, we got some serious competition here. You have to put yourself in their shoes, right? Like, your competition is Naughty Dog and The Last of Us and Uncharted, right? Your competition is Sony Santa Monica with God of War. Your competition is Sucker Punch, right? And all of these great studios that Sony has done a really, really great job with kind of cultivating the talent and making sure that they're putting quality, again, over quantity, giving them the necessary budget, giving them the necessary time. And the only mandates they have are mandates that are going to bring the best out of these development teams and these studios. And I think we're seeing it happen once again with Bend. And I think Bend is going to come out here and show everybody, like, hey, we can hold our own. We can make a great single-player, narrative-driven experience, an open-world game. We can tackle something that's been done before, and maybe in a lot of cases, some people may find it a little bit redundant, but we're going to prove to you why this universe is interesting, why these characters are interesting, why Days Gone is going to be an amazing game, and you're going to want to play it. And honestly, I think it could end up being the next big Sony franchise. We've talked about before how it seems, based off of what I think it was either Sony or maybe a couple developers from Sony Bend, they talked about how Sony wants this to be one of the next big PlayStation franchises, and I think it has all the makings of that. And if you look at, and this is where I don't think Sony themselves is really expecting this game to be like a 10 out of 10 caliber game. Not that it couldn't be. Again, it's not out yet. We don't know. But I don't think Sony themselves expect that, even though they put a lot of time and money into it and invested a lot in Sony Bend with this one, because they understand, and this is the final point I'm going to make here, and why I think Days Gone in the long run is going to prove people wrong. They understand that in some franchises, when they start off, with a new IP, they need to be supported. They may not be the best it can be out of the gate, but the potential there is like immense. Like, a lot of people look to like Uncharted 1 compared to Uncharted 2. From what I've heard, because I know, believe it or not, I haven't played the first 3 Uncharted games, which I'll have to get around to doing that at some point. People have said that Uncharted 1, it was not that great. It was really good, but there was a lot that wasn't so great about it, and they could kind of see how maybe Sony would say, you know what, maybe we don't give this game a sequel. But instead, they did give it a sequel. Turned out to be one of the best games ever created, in general, based off of review scores and how high people hold it, and the rest is history, right? So Sony has proven that they are willing to take chances, that they are willing to give developers the time, the space needed, and the money needed to make this stuff happen, to make sure that they have the talent to do so, to make sure that the talent is being nurtured so that they can get the best game out of these developers that they possibly can. Now, maybe I'm giving them a little bit too much credit here, but it's hard not to, honestly. Again, when you look at the track record, when you look at the path they're going down, when you listen to the things they're saying where, hey, we want our developers and our studios to create the best possible games they can. We're willing to give them the time. We're willing to back them up. We're willing to give new IPs a sequel in most cases. Interestingly enough, I know I'm kind of throwing this in here last second, but a lot of people have said to me that they want to see a sequel to The Order 1886. I've seen a lot of people tell me it's not worth it, it's not a good game, and I've seen just as many people telling me it's a great game and I need to play it, and it definitely deserves a sequel, and they're hoping to see one. Now I'm really interested in trying that game out because I'm curious to see which side of the fence I would fall on. Like, would I end up loving that game and be like, oh man, there's so much potential here, or would I be like, oh wow, this is actually not good. Good thing Sony isn't making a sequel as far as we know to it. I know that was really random, had nothing to do with the video, just kind of got me thinking. But yeah, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I don't want to make it too long, but I really wanted to get this video out here before Days Gone officially releases. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll have to make a follow-up video if Days Gone comes out and it's broken and it's glitchy and it's terrible and people are not enjoying it and it bombs and it ends up being a flop. Obviously, I'd have to make a video saying, wow, guys, I was completely wrong and this is extremely disappointing. Maybe it'll be in the middle where some people love it, some people hate it, or maybe it'll be on the opposite side of the spectrum where it turns out to be an amazing game and another amazing first-party, single-player, narrative-driven experience we get from Sony. So yeah, let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. Do you think Days Gone is going to prove a lot of people wrong? Are you excited for it? Is it a game that you were maybe iffy with at first, but now you're like, oh, I'm actually really liking what I'm seeing? I will be very interested to see what you guys have to say. Be sure to leave this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out as well because that helps tremendously. But until next time, guys, take care.